Amtrak dispatcher Bruce Phillips is believed to be the first crash victim to file a lawsuit against his employer after train 188. Phillips was in the rear of the train commuting back to New York, and his injuries are reportedly extensive, including traumatic brain injury. Joining us now, we have Michael J. Olley and Robert Myers. They are attorneys for Amtrak employee Bruce Phillips. Thank you for joining us, gentlemen. What matters most is how Mr. Phillips is doing. What can you tell us?
He's doing a lot better. He was released from the hospital. He does have a concussion, ongoing concussion, and orthopedic and neurological injuries, but we're happy for his sake that he has been released, although it looks like he will be in a long period of recovery.
And when you say recovery, is there hope that he will get back to 100% and be able to resume his normal life?
Well, that's unknown at this time. He's going to be going through a long rehabilitation process, and that he still hasn't completed all diagnostic testing, and he has been referred to various specialists, and we'll know that in the future.
Well, please send our best to him and his family, and thank you for coming on to make the case for the case.
We'd like to send our best to all the victims of this.
And this is relatively quickly after this accident for suit to be filed. Why the urgency, and what is the basis for the suit?
The reason for that, Chris, is Mr. Phillips is an Amtrak employee. As such, he does not receive or is subject to state workers' compensation law. His only remedy is against his employer under what's called the Federal Employers Liability Act, which is a statute that mandates that in order for him to recover against his employer, he has to prove that his employer failed to provide him with a safe place to work. During the period of time that he is unable to work, he is not eligible for any kind of compensation benefits, such as a regular employee would be under state compensation law.
And help us understand if Amtrak says, well, don't blame us, it was this engineer, that's why the train was going too fast. That hasn't been developed fully by the NTSB. But what is your explanation of why this train was going so fast and why this lawsuit is merited?
There's no reason why the train was going that fast. It doesn't matter whether it was a mechanical failure or the failure of the engineer. Their liability of this company to all the victims of this case, including the decedents, is absolutely clear. And the faster that the victims are compensated and the families of the decedents are taken care of, then the easier then their lives will be in the future. And we hope that this is done quickly, and we actually hope that we just don't get an apology from Amtrak, but they come out and they establish a fund for all the victims and the victims' families to proceed with their lives, not on the normal basis, but just to try to proceed with their lives going through such a tragic, horrible experience.
Getting back to your original question, though, Chris, the Code of Federal Regulations, Federal Railroad Administration regulations, mandate certain speed restrictions. The fact that the train was going twice the legal limit is a violation of those regulations and would render Amtrak absolutely liable in this case.
Now, while it may not be significant to your client, is it important to note for people that there is actually a congressional cap put in place? I think it was, what, 1997 they passed it, that protects Amtrak
yes.
to $200 million as a recovery cap in a situation like this. It sounds like a big number, but you have a lot of people who are hurt here. Is that relevant?
No, it's absolutely relevant. Not only are people hurt, but 8 families lost precious loved ones.
Yes.
And that type of cap is injurious to their rights. It will curtail their rights. And we're hoping Congress will do something immediately to enlarge that cap to compensate all the victims of this horrible accident fairly.
We anticipate, Chris, that
yes.
ultimately, go ahead.
No, please. It's important to hear from you.
No, we anticipate that all of these claims eventually are going to be consolidated in one action, most likely in federal court in the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. At that point in time, the issue of the cap will be, litigated along with that. So it's going to be interesting to see how all that plays out.
And we take your point that in the case of your client, because he's an Amtrak employee, he's going to have bills to pay. He needs to get money up front because workers' comp isn't going to cover it on the state level. That's understood in terms of one of the reasons for the urgency. Let me ask you, do you see any relevance to the larger issue that's being raised about why this accident happened? The train was going too fast. Maybe that will fall on the shoulders of the engineer. But there's also the issue raised by the NTSB that if the positive train control had been in place and functioning as it is supposed to be, this wouldn't have happened regardless of what the engineer did. Is that relevant, and is it true?
That's absolutely relevant and true, but it's more than this. It's not a political question. It's not a budgetary question. The question is, where do you absolutely make this corridor safe for passengers. My family takes the train, my children and my grandchild. This is something that's serious that has to be addressed, not 6 years ago, not 4 years ago, but this horrible accident shows this something that should have been taken care of without any political discussion or debate a long time ago. And you remember, we only have one individual that we know of in front of this train. There are two individuals in front of an airplane. I think the question should be asked, why isn't there more than one individual in this locomotive? Whether you have a failure of the engineer, a failure of the mechanical or electrical system, maybe there should be a personnel to back up other personnel like they do on other transportation systems.
Why you don't have a second person under control, why you don't have the positive train control, why you don't even have seat belts. Certainly, I will agree with you, gentlemen, that these are not stupid questions to be asking. Thank you for being with us. The best to your client and his family going forward. Mick?